Thank you. I noticed a few changes that were in there that I had not submitted in my bio. Thank you for those. And yes, you should all join Phi Kappa Phi. I don't know if your version here at MTSU has it, but many chapters have a secret handshake. And if you don't have a secret handshake, you should start one because rites of passage are important. And as far as stand-up comedy goes, did you have a good childhood or are you funny? I am funny. My topic today is going to be talking about some of the work that we do at the American Indian Law Alliance, which is supporting the Haudenosaunee Nationals in their bid to participate in the 2028 Olympics playing lacrosse, or more accurately, Dehon Chikwes, meaning they bump hips, which is their game. I talk fast. I use technical and precise words because language and words mean something. Ask questions. I have swag to reward you for good questions and even better answers. I don't have answers. I wish I did. And okay, who are the Haudenosaunee? The Haudenosaunee, or the Six Nations Confederacy. Or the Haudenosaunee is a confederacy of 6 nations, originally 5, now 6, sometimes called the Iroquois. This is Iroquois is a pejorative term. I'm going to do my best not to use it. This is a map of Haudenosaunee influence. As you can see, it extends all the way out to Wisconsin, wherever you can find a great white pine, which is a pine tree where the 5 needles grow together. That's an important symbol of the Confederacy. Here's a better map. As you learn in religious studies, a map is not territory, except when it is. Here's another way to describe it. This is the Hiawatha Belt. This belt is thousands of years old. It records the founding of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. Onondaga Nation, which is right outside of Syracuse, you may not know, is a 6 by 6 square mile sovereign indigenous territory located here in New York, located in New York State. If you think of Lesotho in South Africa, same thing. The Hiawatha Belt represents the founding of the Confederacy, and each symbol represents one of the nations. Onondaga Nation is the central fire of the Confederacy. To weaken that concept, a capital. It's represented by the Great White Pine on the Hiawatha Belt. The western door, this is the longhouse, the traditional organizing structure of the Haudenosaunee family household, the clan household, and of the nation. Starting at the western door, we have the Seneca Nation, then we have the Cayuga Nation, Onondaga Nation in the middle, Oneida Nation, Mohawk Nation. The Mohawk Nation is on the eastern door. They are the ones that people are most familiar with. To show this in a different way, here's Syracuse University. Here's where I lived. Here's Onondaga Nation Arena. It was just 2 miles away down 81. I can take 81 all the way to Knoxville. I've done it before. It's boring. Pennsylvania sucks. You have to do 55 miles an hour. This is Faithkeeper Oren Lyons of the Onondaga Nation Turtle Clan. Here he is with the Haudenosaunee passport. He's not a U.S. citizen. He's traveled to over 60 countries on this passport. Over spring break, I joined his family for celebrating his 95th birthday. Everyone in my family dies at 55 to 65 for sad reasons. And here is the 1977 Indigenous delegation that Faithkeeper Oren Lyons is a part of, visiting the United Nations in Geneva. This is the Tadadaho Leon Shenandoah kid who passed away. And this is Faithkeeper Oren Lyons. They went in 1977 because in 1924, Cayuga Chief Discahe traveled on his passport he's the first person to travel on an indigenous passport because passports weren't a thing until colonizers said you needed a passport in the 1900s. So he said, fine, buffalo skin, sew it up, let's go. And he went to give his case of the Cayuga Nation to the League of Nations to advocate for indigenous sovereignties. because the imposed border of the U.S. and Canada ran through his territory. He dies in exile because the League of Nations doesn't want to hear what Descahe had to say. But Descahe became friends with the mayor of Geneva, Switzerland. And there's a little boy who was the mayor's son, who spent a lot of time with Descahe. And that little boy grows up to become mayor of Geneva because they have nepotism in Europe as well. And Descahe, because of Descahe's work, Descahe becomes a hereditary title that when the clan mothers choose the chiefs at Cayuga Nation, they choose a person to fill the role in the title of Descahe. And it's an honored title. So the little boy asked, is Descahe here? And they said yes. And he got to meet the current title holder, Descahe. And so that's a wonderful moment that shows why diplomacy and sovereignty matters. This is Onondaga Nation arena. It's a ice hockey arena and a box lacrosse arena, and has a cafe in it as well. It is in Onondaga. It is called Where They Play Games, and it is pronounced Haudenosaunee Sovereignty. Practice all week. And this is Onondaga Nation arena. The team is the Red Hawks. I'm usually, when I go to games, I would sit up there. On that side, my favorite thing to see was the face-offs. I got this lacrosse stick. It was handmade by Alf Jacques, who you'll see a video of, at Onondaga Nation. I won it in a raffle in 2018 at the Onondaga Nation Arena. I'm 2 for 2 in winning raffles. They're both lacrosse sticks. No more raffles for me. This is Haudenosaunee, where they play ball. This is the field house that was built when they hosted the World Games in 2015 there. Here is a sort of aerial view. It's set up and designed like a longhouse, open to the outside and the natural world, because all living beings play lacrosse with you. This is the outdoor box lacrosse arena there. This is Jim Brown, who's famous for being a multi-sport athlete at Syracuse. This is the corner where Chief Powell has hip checked him into the corner. And they still remember it. This was a lacrosse tournament that was happening that I took the pictures at. Another place for Where Are the Haudenosaunee is Six Nations of the Grand River. This is territory and land that was existed before Canada was a thing. That was to be the land always for the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. 6 miles on either side of the Grand River is Haudenosaunee territory, according to the, and it was reaffirmed in the Haldimand Proclamation of 1784. All of this is their treaty territory. But Six Nations is restricted today to right here. And this is Hamilton, Ontario. This is where all the cool hipsters live. And it's like super expensive. It makes Belmead look cheap. And this is Toronto. I'm not wrong. Taylor Swift has a house in Belmead and in Hamilton. To give you a larger map of where we're talking about, right? This is where Six Nations is on this side of the imposed border, and then I showed you where Syracuse is, right? And New York State, to know your geography. In New York State, it's always important to have a bris: Buffalo, Rochester, Ithaca, Syracuse. And then this is the Six Nations Lacrosse Arena in Canada. Now let's see if this video will play.
You may have to play it in there.
All right. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. It's not liking me. is a family, the Thompson family at Onondaga, which has the record number for the most professional athletes in a single family. Their grandfather played professional lacrosse, their father played professional lacrosse, and Miles, Lyle, Heine, and Jeremy, Miles, Lyle, and Heine all play lacrosse professionally. Jeremy played at Syracuse, Miles and Lyle played at Albany, and both of them won the Tewaaraton Award. The Tewaaraton is the most important award in lacrosse. It's the Heisman Trophy of college lacrosse. Names for lacrosse that I'm going to be using, right? Lacrosse is the name that the Jesuits gave lacrosse, gave the sport, because when the Jesuits came to upstate and central New York, they thought that the lacrosse stick resembled a bishop's crozier, or the stick that a bishop carries. So they renamed lacrosse to lacrosse, and Canada, which lacrosse is the national sport of Canada, Canada prides itself on being the ones to give the rules to the savage game, as I quote from the Canadian Lacrosse Association website. Lacrosse is known as the creator's game, the medicine game. It is not little brother to war. So help me God, it is not the little brother to war. It is the game, it is the creator's game. It is the game given by the creator to the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. All animals and all living beings play. There's a story that children are taught, how the bat gets its wings, about when the land animals played against the animals of the sky world. There was a question of which team does the bat go on. And the birds were like, don't know if you know this about the bat, but he kind of sucks. And the land animals were like, yeah, he's a mammal, but he's kind of an asshole. And they're like, fine, we'll take him. And then the bat is how they win. And so the creator's game, right, this is a story that is about who they are as a people. In religious studies, the magic word for this is hierophany. Hierophany means manifestation of the sacred. The creator's game is a hierophany. It's a manifestation of the sacred in a particular time and place. At Onondaga Lake, it is the birthplace of this game. It is a medicine game. It is a game that is played for peace and healing. If someone is sick, you go out and you play the creator's game to give them healing. If someone has died, you play for them. In Onondaga, it is called Dehom Chikwas, or they bump hips. In lacrosse, because a major leitmotif of this is colonizing the game and making it suck. The hip check was made illegal because Indigenous players were too good at it, and prep school white boys didn't like it. Tewaaraton actually is better pronounced Dawaladoon. Mohawk doesn't have a T, but tell the Jesuits that. And so the Tewaaraton, Dawaladoon, stick with net, becomes the name that is given to the sport. Its highest award. In Onondaga, Oneida, it's Kalasi. In Seneca, it's Tehon Chikwas. It's Gaaji. In Cayuga, it has many names. This is a friendship game between the Haudenosaunee Nationals and Team Ireland that took place before the World Games in 2024. Because for lacrosse to get into the Olympics, there has to be all of these like demos of the Olympics, right? And again, we're colonizing the game. So what happens is we have field lacrosse, which is a colonial set of rules thanks to Canada and England. We have box lacrosse, which is a colonial set of rules thanks to Canada. The Olympics is like, well, we want to have fun. We want to make our rules too. And they call it Super Sixes. And they were doing demonstrations of Super Sixes lacrosse, of getting lacrosse back into the Olympics. And they chose 6 teams to play a demo for the International Olympic Committee in of all places, Birmingham, Alabama in 2022. And they chose Team Ireland, but not the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, not the originators of the game. So Team Ireland gave up their place in that game for the Haudenosaunee to play. So this was a friendship game honoring. There was an exchange of traditional sticks, right? Indigenous games throughout the world, you're going to find a version of a game that involves kicking a ball of some kind, and you're going to find a game that is played with a stick and a ball. The Mesoamerican ball game is one of the oldest and most famous ball games. Hurling is Ireland's traditional game. And so they gave an ash hurler to Team Onondaga, to the Haudenosaunee Confederacy at Onondaga. And the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Haudenosaunee Nationals, gave them a wooden stick, right? It's an exchange of goods, it's an exchange of values, it's an exchange of gifts. Because, have y'all talked about Marcel Mauss yet in your honors classes? Disappointed, Dr. King. Marcel Mauss, Gift Economy, read it. And so this is a game of honoring friendship, relationships, diplomacy, building those connections. That is what's happening there. All right, video number 2, this time with feel. All right, that'll be a no. This is Alf Jacques, who is a traditional stick maker. He recently passed away. Alfie was a phenomenal person. He was a lacrosse goalie when he played. After his playing, and he grew up making lacrosse sticks with his dad, because as the game got domesticated, the wooden stick market got overtaken by plastic sticks, which Alfie always called Tupperware. This is a traditional wooden stick handmade by Alf Jacques. It's made out of a piece of hickory. You have the deer sinew here for the pocket, deer gut here for the sidewall. This is an attackman stick, so it has shooting strings across the top in purple for the Hiawatha Belt of the Confederacy. Alfie's maker's mark, which it's an X with some decoration on it, because he grew up as a survivor of parents and grandparents who went to residential boarding schools, both on the Canadian and American sides of the border. So to explain that, when I first heard of Indigenous residential boarding schools, I thought that sounds kind of awesome. That sounds like Philip Exeter Academy, sounds like Hogwarts, sounds like what I wanted as a kid. To grow up, to go away to school, to go to some posh fancy boarding school, learn to drink tea with my pinkies out. But no, these were oppressive institutions that were church-state collaborations at the incarceration and genocide of indigenous peoples. They started in the 1800s they were inspired by the missionary schools of the Roman Catholic Church during what is euphemistically known in America as the Indian Wars. There's a dude named Custer. Y'all have heard of him, right? Custer had it coming. I'll give some swag to anyone who can tell me the day Custer died. And then he had a colonel that worked under him, Colonel Richard Henry Pratt. Richard Henry Pratt said, "We are losing the war against indigenous peoples. What we need to do is kill the Indian, save the man." So he founded Carlisle Residential Boarding School in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. Nice big motto, think Abik Mat Fry, but it says, kill the Indian, save the man. That was the first boarding school. Do I have any football fans in here? British or American, sort of? Okay, British football was founded to stop children masturbating. But American football is the game. That's why you don't play with your hands.
What?
Soccer isn't played with your hands because it was meant to stop elite boarding school kids from masturbating so much. The priests thought if they got their exercise out in soccer and did things without their hands, they would behave better and quit having such sexual feelings towards each other. The American football is a replication of war. American football is about the replication of war. Names that are synonymous with American football. Pop Warner, which is the name we have for the little leagues, that the kids run around and get traumatic brain injuries before they're 7. is Pop Warner football. Pop Warner coached football at Carlisle Indian School. Okay? Jim Brown, who's a famous name that you need to know. Jim Brown, the literal logo of the NFL, one of the first commissioners. Jim Brown was Sac Fox Nation. Jim Brown's father was a violent and abusive Irishman who hated raising a mixed Indigenous youth. So he sent him to Carlisle. Jim Thorpe grew up in Oklahoma. He was shipped to Carlisle, Pennsylvania to go to boarding school. He ran away 5 times. Ran back to Oklahoma to an abusive father. That should tell you everything you need to know about Carlisle. Carlisle had solitary confinement for children as young as 6 months. Carlisle has prisons in its basement. At Carlisle, when you attended, they shaved your head, beat you for speaking your language, took your clothes from you, gave you the name of a white soldier who died at Custer's Last Stand, or the Battle of Greasy Grass. They have a graveyard at Carlisle where the children were buried. Only 4 children have been repatriated and returned to their families thus far. No more are happening. That all happened under Deb Haaland as Secretary of State. The boarding school era does not end until 1996 in Canada. 1996 is when the end of the assimilationist era of boarding schools. And by assimilation, I mean you attend. They cut your hair, they give you a different name, they beat you for speaking your name, you get put in prison, you die, and you're buried there. Your family doesn't know where you are. You're cut off because they're killing the Indian to save the man. This pin I wear is Orange Shirt Day in memory of all of those lost and stolen to the boarding schools. Read the story of the founding of Orange Shirt Day. And I need you to understand how massive the impact of the boarding school era, assimilationist era is. Every single Indigenous person in North America has been impacted by it. Every single Indigenous person in North America has at least 2 grandparents who went to a boarding school. Every Indigenous person in North America has a parent that went. 1 in 4 went to a boarding school. My dear friend and boss, Betty Lyons at the American Indian Law Alliance, her grandparents are all survivors of the boarding school. Her grandmother, who died at 101 years old, couldn't bring herself to hug anyone. She would say to you, "I need you to hug me," when she wanted a hug. And you would come over and she would sit in her chair and you would give her a hug. She was fluent in 5 languages of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, but she wouldn't speak them to a child past 6 years old because of how badly she was beaten. Betty's husband is Tadadaho Sid Hill, the leader of the Six Nations Confederacy. His parents never hugged him. And upon learning this, their youngest son, Sid Jr., intentionally hugs his father each day and makes him say, "I love you." Even though he knows his dad does. But to help with it, that's the intergenerational trauma of the boarding schools. Mush Hole is a boarding school at Akwesasne, in between Canada and the U.S. Children were stolen from the U.S. by the Canadian government and put into Mush Hole, or Thompson Boarding School, to be accurate. It's called Mush Hole because they shoved children into holes in the ground that they made the children dig as punishment. And then they would feed you mush as you were buried in a hole. Need you to understand that. That's why it is called Mush Hole Residential School. That's where Alfie's parents went. Yes?
Why do we call it boarding school?
Yeah,
Because Colonel Richard Henry Pratt wanted it to sound good because he wanted to sell it to urban middle-class white women to get them to fund it? Great question. No one wants to fund native prison, but boarding school sounds like you're really helping out.
Can we change what we call it today?
So they refer to it as the Native Healing, so the Native American Boarding School Healing Project uses boarding school. Canada tends to use residential school. But Indigenous folks are adamant about using that terminology because that's what they were called when they attended. They don't want further euphemisms. Okay, so in 1996, assimilationist boarding schools ended in Canada. Yay, good job. In the US, 1996, assimilationist boarding schools get cut off from federal funding. There are still some that still run. You can find them on Native American Boarding School Healing Project's website. You can see which boarding schools are still operative and which ones are still operative under the assimilationist model and by which Christian denomination. So Alfie then grew up with parents who were survivors. His mother becomes a clan mother. Now his sister is the clan mother and the keeper of those stories. Alfie passed away recently due, unfortunately, to cancer. And he made wooden sticks. And he trained other people in making wooden sticks. And I regret that the video didn't play, but it's okay, PowerPoint hates me. Okay, so at Carlisle, we talked about Jim Thorpe running away from Carlisle back to home, and an American football as being about war. Carlisle's first game that it plays as a football team, where Jim Thorpe invents the forward pass and a bunch of other stuff about football, but no one in here plays football, so you don't care, was against Army, and it was West Point, and it was called the Battle of Little Bighorn Part 2. And it was supposed to be Custer's revenge. Future President Dwight Eisenhower played quarterback for West Point in that game. Army lost. Jim Thorpe also played lacrosse, but they hated lacrosse being played at Carlisle because it was too native. So they came up with a bunch of rules for lacrosse. And today we have men's and women's lacrosse. Traditionally, within Haudenosaunee culture and society, the Haudenosaunee are matrilineal. The clan mothers pick the 59 chiefs, and they can elevate the chiefs, and they can pull down the chiefs. And chiefs isn't really a good term. Hoyani, men of the good mind, is more accurate. Imagine how things would be if at any time the clan mothers could remove someone from leadership. And the only title picked by the men is Tadadaho. Tadadaho is the leader of the Confederacy. And that's the only title picked by the men. So the women, everything is about balance. The women run the government. The men play lacrosse. And they play this as a medicine game. Women hold and keep different medicines than what the men do. A big challenge within Haudenosaunee culture and society was, can women play lacrosse? And the answer was, yes, women can play lacrosse. No, women can't play Dehon Chikwas. The medicine game and the creator's game that's played in ritual and ceremony with wooden sticks is a medicine game for healing. And that is reserved for the men. But whatever the colonizers do with a bunch of rules and plastic Tupperware, that's fine. That's something different. Classification is a political act. Classification matters. Take a religious studies class. Learn more about classification. And you'll learn to hate it. This is the big orange dome where I would go to worship. This is the Carrier Dome at Syracuse University. And this is another place where lacrosse is played. There is the flag of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy hanging in the Carrier Dome. We start all of the games and all talks with a land acknowledgement at Syracuse. This was the recent game that I was just at over spring break of Syracuse against Johns Hopkins. As you can see, these are a much more modern carbon fiber sticks. Two important numbers at Syracuse that a lot of The best athletes on the teams in all sports wear are 22 and 44. Jim Brown won wear 44. All right, cool. I'm assuming this video isn't going to work either. This is of one of the coolest moments in lacrosse. This is called the air gate, where Gary Gate, who's now the men's coach, he jumps over the back of this lacrosse goal and scores the goal. You had your hand up.
With the PowerPoint on the main page, does it say external media blocked? Because that often is what stops my...
Yeah, probably, but I didn't get here in time to mess with it, so such is life. Do you want sticker or bracelet?
Surprise me.
Well, I already have bracelets in hands, so here you go. Thank you. Okay, and here again is the Georgia Swarm, which is a professional box lacrosse team in Georgia, right down the road in Atlanta. Here's Miles, Lyle, and their brother Jeremy. 3 of the 4 brothers play for the Georgia Swarm. The 4th brother plays for the Albany Firewolves. So we talked about a couple different disciplines, right? We have field lacrosse. Field lacrosse is what you see in high school and college. It's played outdoors. It is 11 on 11. Has this sort of a setup, same size field as a soccer field. The women's game has different lines for it. There's a lot more stopping of the clock. And the women, because the English are the ones who came up with the rule, in college lacrosse, women have to wear skirts to play lacrosse. They hate it and they want it changed. And so we have field lacrosse, and there's professional field lacrosse as well. But box lacrosse, to me, is the most exciting and the most fun. Box lacrosse still allows the use of wooden sticks. This stick by Alfie, this is an attack stick. It's a much lighter piece of hickory. It's much more nimble. This is made by the Mitchell brothers up at Cornwall Island. It is also hickory. It is a defenseman's stick. It's a solid couple pounds heavier. If you get hit with this, I promise you, you will feel it. And so in box lacrosse is like hockey, but on turf. Yes?
You mentioned that the lacrosse sticks were made out of hickory and deer. Why was deer utilized within the stick?
Because all animals in all parts of the natural world are a part of the game. And they all bring their own gifts and offerings. And so you have the deer hide is used for the ball. The hickory nut or other nuts are used for the interior of the ball. And all of the animals are part of the game in different ways. So, excellent question. Bracelet or sticker?
Bracelet. Thank you.
And there's a pronunciation key inside. Yes?
What about the wood? Because you said they're both made from hickory. Does it have
Yes.
to do with weight or durability?
Both. Weight, durability, ash will break. Lacrosse is very intense, very physical. You will be getting body checked with this lacrosse stick. So then the Olympics are like, we want lacrosse to be different. So one of the things that happens, so instead of it being 11 on 11 in the field game, or 5 on 5 like box lacrosse, they're like, we want lacrosse to be in the Summer Olympics, but 6 on 6, and to fit on a rugby pitch. Because rugby isn't as popular, so they're like, when the soccer pitches are being used, we'll just stick them on the rugby pitch. And then they got rid of the face-off, and they made a bunch of other changes that you don't care about to the game. And so this is Super Sixes between Team Canada and the Haudenosaunee. And this has happened on Orange Shirt Day. So the Haudenosaunee are wearing atypically orange for them. In professional lacrosse, we have the Premier Lacrosse League, which is pro lacrosse. And in box lacrosse, there's way more teams, pretty much all throughout Canada. And then in a lot of surprising U.S. locations, there are box lacrosse teams. I absolutely love watching box. It is either 3 periods or 4 quarters, because we like to keep things exciting. It's incredibly physical and very demanding, and again, it's like hockey but with a ball. Was that a hint?
Yeah, sorry. I always had this stereotype that lacrosse was kind of like a rich people's sport.
Yes.
And I was just wondering how we got there from like a sport that is taking things from nature. I mean, it seems like should be an expensive thing.
Absolutely.
That kind of stereotype.
That stereotype exists because of Colonel Richard Henry Pratt and the residential boarding schools, and being like, oh yeah, the Indian boarding schools are playing against Mama's Boy Academy, NBA over in Nashville, or Franklin Road Academy, or whatever. So that's how the stereotype exists, because they wanted the NFL and the U.S. Army wanted lacrosse, this indigenous game, to become inaccessible to commoners because it taught principles counter to rugged masculinity. You should need to play football because football's the game of war. That's what real men play. And you can't play this game connected to nature. You'll go native if you play that, right, is one of the concerns. So excellent question, and it's an important stereotype that I'm trying to break down. So lacrosse leagues gets super weird. It gets complicated. My partner's always like, what lacrosse league and type are you watching? Is it quarters or periods? What's going on? Because on a weekend, I'll watch professional box lacrosse, then I'll watch some field lacrosse, and then I'll watch pro field, and then college field, and then semi-pro lacrosse, which is senior A, which is like the most elite level. Some of those players get paid. The 21st century Peterborough Lakers are paying their players, full stop. Those guys make some money. The Ontario Lacrosse Association will tell you that they do not pay their players. They provide them with a generous stipend, but like Tim Hortons is one of the sponsors of the team, and the generous stipend includes a house. In the Western Lacrosse Association out west, while it's senior A, they get paid way less. But like Onondaga's nation's senior A team is all volunteer. So at the senior A level, some teams are paid, some aren't. At senior B, nobody's getting paid. Senior C is colloquially known as beer league. Senior C is typically like 40 and up folks getting after it. And then you have junior A, B, and then just juniors. And juniors is 21 and under. So, okay. So if you win a championship, that's a ship, right? If you win in juniors, if you win the junior A championship, and then you go and you play the senior B championship and you win that, and then you win in senior A, which some guys have done all in 1 year, and then that is referred to as the luxury cruise liner, because you got 3 rings in 1 year. And then here's the little kids playing, little 5-year-olds. They're super mean. They're great. They really get after it. And then when all male children that are born receive a hickory lacrosse stick, and it's the one thing that crosses over with you to the natural. That crosses over when you leave the natural world. And this is the son of the founder of traditional lacrosse and his little cradle stick. This kid's like 25 now, and his parents still have this on the website. I'm sure he loves it. So the World Lacrosse is the governing body of lacrosse, right? At the amateur level. So you can't get paid playing Olympic lacrosse. World Lacrosse has had a bunch of names, and the International Olympic Committee made them change their name more. IOC is stupid. And then we talked about the different types, regulation and classification as colonization. Here's the Haudenosaunee Nationals. Okay, lacrosse used to be in the Olympics. It was in 1904 and 1908. It was in the Olympics, and then the IOC banned it because the natives were too good, and the indigenous folks were too good, and they embarrassed Team England. Team England showed up drunk for the game and then lost by 20 some odd points, and they're like, that was embarrassing. To fix this problem, we're not going to tell our players to not drink alcohol and to treat it like an actual competition. We're going to ban Indigenous athletes for being too professional. So in 1989, when the Olympics were in LA, the Haudenosaunee Nationals, then called the Iroquois Nationals, pictured on the right, Faithkeeper Oren Lyons appearing all the way through, right there, Haudenosaunee Sovereignty with the Eagle staff. They showed up and they played a road demonstration on fields next to the Olympics and pulled people away and got them there, and they got a lot of international attention in lacrosse. This leads to the founding of what's now called World Lacrosse. The full name is worldlacrosse.sport, again, dumbest name ever. And so we get the Haudenosaunee Nationals in 1989. Now here they are in 2023 at the World Games in San Diego in field lacrosse. This is the coach, Lars Tiffany. He coaches for UVA. He's not Indigenous, but he grew up playing in upstate New York. Right before this game, Alfie passed away last year in 2024. Lars Tiffany always grew up playing lacrosse with a wooden stick, made first by Alfie's dad and then by Alfie. And when Lars's dad was dying of cancer, he asked Alfie to make Lars a stick and give it to Lars at his funeral. And the funeral was shortly before the World Games, and so that's the stick that Lars got from Alfie for his dad, and he played with it during warm-ups. And still, if you see him on the sidelines at a UVA game, he will have that stick. So here we are at the Olympics. In 1904, the 3 gold medals went to Canada, US, and then the Mohawk Indians lacrosse team of Canada. In 1908, we had Canada versus Great Britain. Then we had some demos. And so for 2028, right, Biden and Trudeau have said that they support the Haudenosaunee that they support lacrosse being in the Olympics, and the Haudenosaunee marching under their own flag, under their own anthem, and being a part of the Olympics and not a part of either nation. The IOC is going to be voting on that. All right, so here are your takeaways from this talk of the things that you should remember about lacrosse and play. First, lacrosse is more than a game. Second, it's about creation and a hierophany. It's a remembering of the manifestation of the sacred, the forming of a confederacy. It is a medicine game. It is a game that brings peace and brings nations together. And that is about sovereignty. Faithkeeper Oren Lyons says, sovereignty is the act thereof. Sovereignty is the act thereof. Onondaga nations never taken federal funding, never received federal funding. When the 1924 Citizenship Act happened, the clan mothers wrote a letter to the U.S. and said, it wasn't even thanks, but no thanks, it was nah. And they are still sovereign territory. When students go down to Onondaga Nation and buy smokes underage, because you have to be 21 to buy smokes. They want to buy smokes nice and cheap at Onondaga Nation, right? They pass a fake ID. And then they wind up doing 5,000 hours of community service. And they're like, oh, and once this happened to a Kennedy. She was in my religion and sports class. She got so pissed. And she was like, don't you know who my family is? And they're like, no. They're like, you're going to hear about this. And they're like, okay, look, this is going to be an international incident. The FBI won't let me be in prison. And they're like, we don't have a prison, we don't have a police force, you're just doing community service all day, every day for 5,000 hours. And so she did it for, that's a lot of time, okay? 5,000 divided by 40, do the math. It's a lot of time. And like, Customs and Border Patrol sat at the border and watched her do it. FBI sat at the border, watched her do it. All day, every day, picking up trash. Sovereignty is the act thereof. The original free nations of Turtle Island, when they saw the colonizers arriving, they were already enjoying their original free prior existence. Second, with that, when I talk about indigenous nations and indigenous nationhood and sovereignty, ignore everything that you learn about the Treaty of Westphalia and onwards. They mean something different in a different way. Third, lacrosse is about a connection between you and the natural world. Play is not just play. Play is about honoring your relationship to the natural world. You all have rights and responsibilities to the natural world. There is, Haudenosaunee folks will tell you there is no religion in Haudenosaunee culture. There are only obligations and expectations. It doesn't matter if you believe in the Creator or not. You have an obligation to make the world better for the 7 generations yet unborn. You have an obligation to care for the fish and for the entire natural world, to not pollute the water. So it doesn't matter if you believe in that or not. You need to take care of that unless you like really enjoy drinking water filled with raw sewage. And lacrosse is relational, right? This is a game about building relationships between countries. It's the reenactment and affirmation of Indigenous sovereignty and of Indigenous treaties by traveling across the world on a Haudenosaunee passport. It is about having a good mind, playing with a good mind. And having a good mind means to think and operate and move and act with clarity. What are your questions for me? Yes.
So it originated with the Haudenosaunee.
Yes. At Onondaga Lake outside of Syracuse.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yes. So when you mentioned the natives.
With the indigenous peoples. Yes. What's your question?
It's not necessarily a question. I just wanted to tell you thank you for breaking the stereotypes with lacrosse and providing this information.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you to Dr. King for having me. Other questions? Yes.
Are they still, or is there still threat to those people when it comes to assimilation and their sovereignty being threatened?
All day, every day, of course.
Our nation, especially in our current climate of,
Absolutely.
yeah, our current climate.
The indigenous peoples constantly face acts of erasure, genocide, and these are constant, consistent issues. At Onondaga Nation, they are fortunate because they don't accept federal funding. They are entirely self-sufficient. But Onondaga Lake, which is one of the largest Superfund sites in North America, is a lake that people do 40 meals a month of subsistence fishing out of, including and again, it doesn't think it's a helpful label, but refugee communities and poor communities of Syracuse. They're eating 40 meals a month out of Onondaga Lake, which is so polluted with mercury, you can smell it and see the sheen of mercury. There are 40 pollutants in Onondaga Lake. 39 of them are trademarked in secrets of Honeywell. We can't know what they are, but they promise they're food safe, but they won't drink the water when you take it to the meetings. And they capped the mercury in the lake. So what they did was they built a sand pile, put some reactive elements that draw mercury into the sand, put a trash bag over the sand, covered it in cement, and called it done. And now those sand caps are leaking. Also, Onondaga Lake, a lot of raw sewage is dumped into Onondaga Lake. Whenever the plant overflows, raw sewage goes into it, and as of last week, the EPA has increased the limit of amount of raw sewage that's considered safe for drinking in your drinking water. I said that right as you took a nice big old swig. So, yes, that's one of the many environmental threats. But one of the things I think is really important with your question, it's a great question, is not that federal recognition matters, but there's 601 federally recognized indigenous nations in the U.S. There are well over 600 Aboriginal or First Nations recognized in Canada. If you include state recognized or provincially recognized, that number goes up to almost 1,000 on both sides of the imposed border. If we include all peoples who self-identify as indigenous and have a distinct language and culture, we're breaking 1,000. So I do not wish to stereotype or to say that the issues that face them all are the same. There are significant and important differences that are worth honoring. Even within the 6 nations of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, there are major differences. Yes?
As kind of a follow-up question, are there things that we can do to support these people and their sovereignty and their recognition and kind of just support these nations as they are?
Fabulous question. One excellent example is I pay real rent. Go to native-land.ca. Look up the indigenous. On whose land do you live? Whose land do you live on? Who are those indigenous peoples? How much do you pay in rent a month? Pay that to that nation. The campaign is called I Pay Real Rent. It started by the Duwamish peoples on both sides of the imposed border. That is one fantastic example. Second one is advocating for land back and land return, indigenous lands in indigenous hands. Third is supporting the Haudenosaunee Confederacy's bid to participate in the Olympics. Fourth is buying and supporting indigenous artisans and crafts wherever you are able. Join us at the powwow each year. MTSU sponsors all students being able to attend the powwow on Fridays for free. Your student fee's already covering it, so you better go. You can eat your body weight in fry bread. Highly recommend that. I do it. Fry bread is amazing. Yes, what is your question?
I just want to say thank you for shedding light on boarding schools. A while back I went to a penitentiary, and some of the behaviors and some of the punishments that they had there at Russian Mountain Penitentiary, very similar to the incidences that occurred with these children at boarding schools.
Yes.
One of the cells there at Russian Mountain, it's no bigger than a locker, and they're there for 6 months in pitch black.
Yes.
So thank you for shedding light on those boarding schools.
And these boarding schools, assimilationist boarding schools, are still being operated by churches today. I want to be very clear about that.
Yes.
There are also federally recognized boarding schools that are still being operated today that were previously assimilationist schools that have changed, like the Sherman Indian School is now no longer an assimilationist school. That's doing a lot of work to change its relationship. But I'm 1 minute over and you have to go away.
Join me in thanking Dr. Brett for
I bought a lot of stickers and bracelets for y'all. Please take some on your way out.